Good morning. Welcome in. We are live here on Instagram TS and on our YouTube channel. You can just find me at Trevor Steinbacher on YouTube. In for Week 12's Reds Stinker Tinker. We might have already seen the top quarterback of the week. We might have already seen Thursday's games were really fun to watch. If you're playing the Thanksgiving Day slate, only ended up with 2 of the 3 games we expected, but still nonetheless had a good time. Hopefully you won a little money on daily, and hopefully your Week 12 got started on the right foot this week. Let's start talking about the top quarterback. But I think Patrick Mahomes today, our Chiefs, baby, I think he's got the best opportunity to go ahead and potentially catch Deshaun Watson today. It's the highest over-under on the week with 56. The Bucs giving up at least 2 touchdowns over the last 5 games, in each game of the last 5 games. And the shootouts bode well for Patrick Mahomes. We all know that. Tom and Patrick Mahomes, I think they both can end up as top 5 quarterbacks this week. I'm going to give the nod to Mahomes. It's a top spot, maybe potentially catching Deshaun Watson's 33 points from Thursday. Streaming quarterback of the week, I'm going Derek Carr. In the Dome, in Atlanta, against a bad defense. The Falcons are dead last against opposing quarterbacks when it comes to fantasy football. The Falcons, if you think back, they fired Dan Quinn. They played well the first couple of games. They're kind of back to that old way of just playing bad defense. Look for Derek Carr, hook up with Darren Waller, Nelson Aguilar, maybe sprinkle in a little Hunter Henry. Hopefully Henry Ruggs gets into the action. We haven't seen that recently. I'm not expecting it, but I do expect a lot of Darren Waller this week. If you need a streaming quarterback, maybe you lost Lamar due to COVID this week. Maybe you lost Joe Burrow last week due to injury. You need that streaming quarterback this week. Derek Carr should be a fine play this week. Top running back of the week. Again, we might have already seen this on Thursday with Antonio Gibson, 3 touchdowns, ending up with 36.6 happen. Excited to see that. I think that he ends up getting all 3 down of work next year. More pass catching. He's kind of been getting more pass catching as we go. But today's not about Antonio Gibson. Today's about Dalvin Cook. Again, got to go back to the well. Absolute smash spot against the Carolina defense that we've really tried to target over the course of the season. They're not very good. In fact, only 4 times have they not given up 100 yards to opposing running backs. Arizona, Kansas City, Chicago, Detroit. Arizona and Kansas City, they go through their quarterbacks, that offense. Chicago's offense is just terrible. And Detroit, that was when Swift got hurt last week. They had a game plan with Swift. He gets hurt. They kind of abandoned the run. That was just a terrible game overall. So Carolina's defense can be had. In all other games, they've given up at least 18 fantasy points to running backs, and just once have they not given up double-digit fantasy points, and that was last week against Detroit. He's Dalvin Cook's $1,100 on FanDuel, but I think if you're playing a daily cash game this week, he's got to be in there. He's going to be our top running back of the week. Other daily fantasy running backs I like today, Wayne Gallman, 5,700. Quietly, he's at double-digit FanDuel points over the past 4 weeks. Now he's getting to run against the 30th rush defense in the league. I like Wayne Gallman at $5,700. Save some cash there. Brian Hill, another very cheap running back play this week. Could be very chalky at $5,100. He's starting in place of Todd Gurley, but the chalk could save you some cash this week. Austin Eckler, $6,500. He's back this week. Finally, he's back. Cheap price. I don't think he's going to be on a terribly low pitch count. It does seem like he's not going to be the bell cow. But no Kalen Ballage today. No Justin Jackson anymore. So they don't really have that pass-catching running back. So look for Austin Eckler to kind of play a larger role than what they're even telling us about. $6,500, not too bad of a salary. Let's look at wide receivers again. Top wide receiver of the week. Maybe we saw it on Thanksgiving. Will Fuller lit up the Detroit Lions defense, 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. He ends Thanksgiving Day with 35.1 fantasy points. But today, I think Keenan Allen gets after it. Game totals over-under is 52.5 points. I think this game hits the over. Keenan Allen, touchdown in 6 of the last 8 games. 12.5 targets per game over the last 5 games. Those 5 games since the bye week, really him and Justin Herbert have really started to connect. And Keenan Allen, over 20 fantasy points in 4 of those last 5 games. I think he continues to dominate this week. Look for him to have the best opportunity to catch Will Fuller's 35 fantasy points. Other wide receivers I like for daily fantasy this week, Bucks and Chiefs wide receivers, any of them. Take your pick on which one you want to play. Do you want to play the higher salary, lower salary? My favorite is Antonio Brown and Tyreek Hill. I think you can mix in some Sammy Watkins. I'm not super high on him, but he is going to be back this week. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, plenty of opportunities there with them. They're just a little bit more expensive than the official update come through quite yet, but I do know he is expected to miss. The Vegas defense, they can be had. Julio misses. This could also open up opportunity for like a Russell Gage if you need to go really cheap on daily. Another really cheap Nelson Aguilar, $5,200. Bring back that Calvin Ridley play with an opposite wide receiver. You like to stack a game. This game's indoors in the dome. 2 bad defenses. Why not stack it a little bit here? Nelson Aguilar, 2 stinkers over the last 7 games. One was against Denver. I don't remember who the other one was against, but he has those weird games that he gets, 2 catches for 20 yards and kind of puts up a dud. But I don't think this is the week. I think he does really well this week, and he's going to be a fine play at just that $5,200. Cole Beasley, $5,400. John Brown's out. When John Brown's out, Cole Beasley smashes. Last week, after Brown goes out, Beasley goes off for 13 targets. And in week 8, the last time John Brown missed a full, trying to travel across the country, I like Cole Beasley at that $5,400. All right, let's go into tight end here. Darren Waller as our top tight end of the week. And at this point, it seems like it's Darren Waller's Travis Kelce. Take your pick which one you want to play. I'm going to give the nod to Darren Waller this week just because he's playing that Falcons defense, who are the absolutely worst defense against tight ends this season. Game this week, so that's a large volume tournament. This tournament that I'm in it's a single entry, 6,000 players in. Could just be a way to get a little bit different this week. Another daily tight end that I like, and I'm not super high on any of the tight ends outside of Travis Kelce or Darren Waller, but this guy, Mike Gesicki, $5,600. If you're really needing to save some cash, this could be an opportunity as Fitzmagic starts the game there for Miami as Tua's out for an injury. Two of the first 6 games, Gesicki hit over 14 fantasy points with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's a cheaper long shot play this week at tight end. But again, if you're trying to save some cash, you can't afford to pay up for Darren Waller or Travis Kelce, go ahead and mix in a little Mike Gesicki. Excuse me. Shockers up, right? All right. Let's go into some of the games that I like this week. Give me all of that. Chiefs at Bucks. It's going to be an afternoon game. Just buckle in. Enjoy the ride. I think it'll be a great, fun game. Highest over under of the week, 56 points. 2 defenses that have been kind of reeling lately. You got Tom Brady. You got Pat Mahomes. How do you not love this game? Old GOAT versus new GOAT. And you got all those skill players on all sides of the ball. I think you need to be using them. I think it's going to be a fun game. Give me all of that. Chiefs at Bucks. On the other side of the helm, though, don't like that. That's going to be the New York Giants at the Cincinnati Bengals. Over-under is just 44 this week. And this was supposed to be a fun game, right? When you see it on your calendar, you're thinking, oh, man, we got Danny Dimes. We got Joe Burrow. This game is going to be awesome. Well, unfortunately, Joe Burrow is out, and I think now this game's kind of a dud. All the Bengals pass catchers, they should see a downgrade this week. I think you play your Giants, Wayne Gallman, Danny Dimes if you need to. I don't think Cincinnati's going to score enough to push him, but if you need to play him there, I think you can. And I really think the Giants' defense is probably one of the top streaming defenses. My favorite defense, of course, the Saints, because the Broncos don't have a quarterback. They're running a wide receiver out there at quarterback. this week. But I do think that the Giants can be a very healthy defense to be had this week if you're streaming defenses. New York Football Giants at the Cincinnati Bengals. Don't like that. You snooze, you lose this week. Antonio Brown only being started in 20 points in PPR, scoring the last 2 games, each of the last 2 games. He's increased his production in all 3 games he's played. 13 targets last week. Tom Brady absolutely loves himself. So Antonio Brown's living with Tom Brady. You think these guys got a little bit of a connection. He's the middleman. Like, he runs up the middle of the field. He's the deep target, 15, 20 yards down the field, right over the middle. I love the game. I already told you that it's the game. Give me all of it. Quite yet. This is the week. Go ahead, Antonio Brown. You snooze, you lose. Our hit it and quit it of the week, Benny Snell. Of course, a caveat, only if the game gets played on Tuesday. But even if it does play, it doesn't sound like James Conner will be available. Therefore, you're going to play Benny Snell. I think Anthony McFarland will get a little bit of play this week, but Benny Snell, see it, Pittsburgh, they just want to get in, run the ball, play great defense, get the hell out of Dodge. Look for Benny Snell to have a decent game for you in season long this week, especially if you have James Conner. Go ahead and slide Benny Snell in if you need to. Benny Snell, hit it and quit it. Our coulda, shoulda, woulda of the week, James White. He's only owned in 48.2% of leagues. And Rex Burkhead, excuse me for the dogs. Apparently something's going on. Rex Burkhead's out for the season. That opens up opportunity here for James White. Last week, James White catches 6 passes for 64 yards. He ended up with 14.3 PPR points. That's a nice floor for PPR running backs. I don't think his ceiling is going to be what it once was. Back when Tom Brady was there, you love James White catching the ball out of the backfield. I don't think he's got that anymore, but he does have a consistent floor. Go ahead and stash him on the end of your bench. Going to be good running back depth moving forward as you get into the playoffs, as we have all the COVID situations going on. I'll talk a little. Not saying you got to play him every week, but just to make sure that you have him on your bench in case something happens to one of your running backs. James White at 48% owned. Right now, you can go get him. James White, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Our fallback boy this week, I'm going with the Bengals wide receivers. With no Joe Burrow, I think the Bengals wide receiver production really takes a big hit this week and really the rest of the season. Tyler Boyd now, I think he drops down to a flex play, and a low-end flex play at that. I don't think A.J. Green and T. Higgins should be in your lineups this week. I hope that we do see something this week to give together. If I have to play Boyd, I will. But overall, I'll try to just avoid playing any of these guys. Bengals wide receiver are finish up here. I just want to give a shout out to Homefront Realty, Chris Grieve, great sponsor from day one of the show. If you're looking to buy a home, go ahead and do it right now. This is a great time to be buying. The mortgage rates are low. The market is hot for buyers right now. Go reach out to Chris Grieve. Give him an email, shoot him an email, shoot him a text. Remember, you can email him at grievechris@kw.com. So go ahead and get a hold of him. And also want to go ahead and give a shout out and thanks to our sponsor, Sam Markinet, owner, operator, SM Auto Detailing. You need to go ahead and get a hold of him. 10% off the Rumbles of Red listeners until the end of November. One more day. Go ahead and find him on smautodetailing.com. Get your free quote today. Again, it's smautodetailing.com. Thanks to both of them. Our sponsors are great for us here on the Rumbles of Red. And now for my ball prediction of Week 12. In Week 3, we see a healthy Austin Eckler go for 59 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Catches 11 passes, 84 yards. The Austin Eckler that we were all hoping for. When you drafted him in the first round or the top of the second round, that's the guy you were wanting to see. He told me he's going to be on a pitch count. He goes for 69 yards and a touchdown on the ground, 10 catches, 82 yards and a touchdown. Looks great against our Chiefs. He totaled 37.1 fantasy points that week. The whole point of this, these running backs, they don't need a full workload. They can be on a pitch count and still be great. And Austin Eckler is back this week, albeit he's on that pitch count. He's back. And what that means for me and my bold prediction, one, get him in your lineup now. I think Austin Ekeler goes for over 25 fantasy points this week. Again, these guys, him and Christian McCaffrey, they catch so many passes. They don't need a full workload. They don't need to be 100% involved in the action in the offensive scheme because they can catch a couple passes out of the backfield and take off. Plus, I think once Austin Ekeler gets out there, it's going to be hard for the coaches to take him off the field if he's looking great. Austin Ekeler follows in C-Mac's footsteps by coming back from injury and looking great all of a sudden. He goes for more than 25 PPR fantasy points this week. Justin Herbert falls in love with his new old running back, Austin Ekeler, over 25 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Make sure you put him in your lineup. Don't sit around and wait for next week. We're out the league. And I'm going to recommend today a different type of roster construction moving into the playoffs. Usually this time of year, all I care about for my bench players are my running backs, handcuffs, a second defense, those main source of roster construction, making sure that I know what's going to happen. If this happens, I'm already prepared. But with all the contact tracing and all the COVID, the handcuffs, they could be out for COVID, even if the stud is out with COVID. And that scares me a little bit here this season with the puck my rosters in standard leagues this season. I'm going 2 quarterbacks, not something I normally do. Usually I just run 1 quarterback and leave all the bench spots. But this season with playoffs, I'm going 2 quarterbacks. Even if your number 1 is a stud, you got Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes. Even if you have that stud that you're not going to play him, you're not going to bench him, but look at Lamar Jackson this week. With COVID, all of a sudden now you don't have your stud quarterback. You got to put that second quarterback on your bench right now. It doesn't have to be the greatest quarterback, but make sure you have a quarterback. Maybe it's Daniel Jones. He has he's got a good schedule coming up. You're not going to play him every week, but if you had to play him, you'd be comfortable playing him. Make sure you have 2 quarterbacks on your roster the rest of the season. And then handcuff running backs 1 or 2. You're not going to handcuff all your players because, again, if the stud gets COVID, the backup is probably going to be out as well due to contact tracing. And then after your studs, you need 1 or 2 pivot running backs. Chase Edmonds, James White, Nyheim Hines, all guys that you're not necessarily happy with playing every single week. But if your stud, if Dalvin Cook gets COVID and Alexander Mattison has to miss as well due to contact tracing, well, you can pivot to a Nyheim Hines or Chase Edmonds. You're not going to be happy with it. Obviously, you want Dalvin Cook or Alexander Mattison, but you have to have that pivot spot this season, especially this season. Tight ends, we're sticking with 1 tight end. There's plenty of garbage out there on the waiver wires. We don't really care that much about a second tight end this year. Take your 1 tight end. If you got a Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, you're playing those guys every week as long as they're healthy and they're in. And if you have to find a streamer that week, you'll find that you don't need to bench that person. Don't need a second tight end on your team right now. But defenses, you do. You got to have 2 defenses. And this is the staple this time of year. No matter what, you always play 2 defenses during the playoffs. And here's why. You've got your defense you're playing this week, and you got your defense you're playing next week, right? You already know who you're playing because if you can stay ahead of the game and look a couple weeks out, you stay ahead of your league as well, who might be streaming week to week. Say you got the Dolphins. You're going to play them against the Jets today. Well, they got the Burrow-less Cincinnati Bengals next week. So you're going to maybe keep the Dolphins for then too. But in week 14, they play the Chiefs. So you're not going to play the Dolphins defense. So you could go right now, find a defense who has a great matchup in week 14, and you are set now for the next 3 weeks at defense because you're rostering 2 defenses as opposed to 1 defense. This is the best time during the playoffs and your last push for the playoffs to make sure you have 2 defenses on your team. The rest of your roster, you're just going to backfill with many different options at wide receiver. Try to build as much depth there as possible. 2 quarterbacks, 1 or 2 handcuffs with at least 1 pivot running back, 2 defenses. The rest you're going to go with wide receiver. A little bit of a different roster construction this season as opposed to the past. In the past, I would be all about some 2 defenses. This year, you got to have a quarterback on your bench. You got to have the 2 defenses. and you only need 1 or 2 handcuff running backs there. Good luck in week 12. I hope you learned something this morning. And as always, don't over tinker.